What is up, guys? It's me, the ALE Double X Prince, here with part two of What If Eddie Guerrero Never Died in 2005. Now, part one was just his early run in the WWE, where he pretty much, is at the top and eventually, work his way down the bottom of the card, but still pretty relevant. But I even said I wanted to test myself. I wanted to see if I was able to pull this off. And that is why I decided to do what I did, where it's like Eddie Guerrero leaves. Because I think deep down that would have happened. Eddie Guerrero would have left WWE if he was still alive, like around 2008. Because a lot of other stars were like up and coming. So I'm pretty sure Eddie Guerrero would have just been tired of it. Even though he got a chance to main event WrestleMania in my booking, I think down the road he would have ended up in Impact Wrestling. After all, that's where everybody freaking ended up at. So here is part two of What If Eddie Guerrero Never Died in 2005. Total nonstop action. Now we kick off, at WrestleMania 24, Eddie Guerrero loses a match to Batista, and that's when Eddie Guerrero realizes that he's just done with the WWE. He has nothing left. He asks for his release, and unlike now, Vince says, "Fine, you need to get out. Um, just go. Just know that doors open." Now, around this time, I think deep down, if Eddie were to leave, he would have probably taken Vicky and Chavo with him. Now, side note: a lot of people think that Vicky and Edge would have worked as La Familia, but I think deep down, Edge didn't really need Vicky Guerrero. I mean, it was cool that he had to like um flirt his way up to be the top player and go after Vicky Guerrero, just like, to date her and stuff. But Edge didn't really need that. And if they still want to do that angle where a hot chick, or in this case, Vicky Guerrero, wanted to, like, they could have gotten somebody else. I mean, they could have had other divas that were not doing anything. I think Vicky Guerrero, the only reason why she was at theirs because Eddie passed away and they wanted to give her a job. But in this universe, Eddie doesn't die, so Eddie Guerrero is nowhere to be seen following WrestleMania 24. He is nowhere to be seen. Everybody's thinking, oh, he might end up in TNA someday, or maybe he just needs a break. I don't know what's the story, but at TNA Slammiversary 2008. The show is pretty packed. The show goes on, and then in the middle of the card, like after like the second or third match, we see Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, and Vicky Guerrero sitting in the front row enjoying the show. Then they get some big applause. They get a standing ovation. They do all of this, and people are excited. And then that continues people to get hyped for the show. In the real card of Slammiversary 2008, LAX beats Team 3D. That will still happen. But after the match, LAX cuts a promo talking shit, and then they see Eddie and Chavo Guerrero. Then they go to them, and then Hernandez smacks Eddie Guerrero, and then Eddie and Chavo jump the barricade and they beat the crap out of them, and then they go into a big brawl in the ring, and then Eddie and Chavo stand tall on top of the TNA ring. That's the first time they ever stand on a TNA ring, the six-sided ring, of course. And it tells us that Eddie and Chavo Guerrero are going to sign with the show. Also on the card now at Slammiversary 2008. Let me just double check the card. So around this time, Samoa Joe is the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, so he's on a dominant run, and that will play into things later. But then Los Guerreros team up and they go after LAX, of course, to get the belt off of him. The tag team belt off of LAX, and of course, Los Guerreros win. Eddie and Chavo are your new TNA tag team champions, and they just go through the whole tag team division. Motor City Machine Guns. I forgot who was in the tag team division. Hell, around this time, the Young Bucks, when they weren't around, they could have been in the match. That would have been a big marquee moment, and like years later. But yeah, there were some good teams. The Wolves. I guess they could fight Team 3D. Um, they just go after the tag team division. They just go after everybody, and then as they're going on a dominant run, they lose their tag team belts at Bound for Glory to Beer Money, Beer Money Inc., which were one of the more over tag teams around this time. So Los Guerreros lose the tag team belts to Beer Money. On the main event now at Bound for Glory 2008, the main event was Sting versus Samoa Joe, where Sting takes the belt off of Samoa Joe. That does happen. And then, you know, the main event Mafia will come into play later. But in the beginning, uh, Christian Cage and Eddie Guerrero, around this time, Christian Cage was ready to leave TNA. Um, so they would probably do anything to convince him to stay, including giving him a feud with Eddie Guerrero and still stand tall. And yeah, that would happen. Christian Cage and Eddie Guerrero will start their mini feud. But then Christian Cage wins, beats Eddie Guerrero after Chavo Guerrero screwed him, tired of being on his back, like tired of being in the shadow of Eddie Guerrero. So then at Final Resolution, Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero street fight. Eddie Guerrero wins. Christian Cage, even though he got a victory over Eddie, he'll still leave to WWE because that's where the big money is. And now that Eddie Guerrero has done with his feud with Chavo, he did a fun tag team division run. He had a good match with Christian Cage. It's time to move on to the main event Mafia, where he wants to be, or he is asked to be recruited by the main event Mafia. And he takes some time to think about. We're basically building up Jericho and Moxley from 2020, when they want to get Moxley to join the inner circle, but then turns on them, and that's pretty much what we're gonna do. And then at TNA Genesis, it'll be AJ Styles, Eddie Guerrero, and Mick Foley versus Kurt Angle, or Sting, Booker T, and Scott Steiner. Kurt Angle will go do something else. I could probably fight Jeff Jarrett or whoever the hell was around. But yeah, Team WCW versus Team New Generation, basically, and it'll be a fun match where Sting and where AJ Styles gets the victory, which gets him over, and then at against all odds, AJ Styles beats Sting, and meanwhile Eddie Guerrero is going after everybody in the main event Mafia, from Booker T, Kurt Angle, Scott Steiner, all of those guys. So eventually Eddie Guerrero goes after all of them and beats them fair and square with the help of Joe and other people in the process. So that's what happens, and then it's time to be a world champion. So throughout Impact's television shows, they start making matches where like the winner will face AJ Styles for the TNA championship at Slammiversary, and that ends up becoming like a three-way tie between Joe, Kurt Angle, and Eddie Guerrero. So at Slammiversary, the main event, check this out, an epic fatal four-way for the TNA championship. AJ Styles will defend his belt against Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, and Samoa Joe. Tell me that does not sound like a kick-ass main event. And of course, Eddie Guerrero wins 1 year after he debuted at Slammiversary. The next year, he is your TNA champion. That will be a big markout moment. It'll be a happy moment. And then at the next pay-per-view, which was trying to remember. Well, first he finishes his feud with Kurt Angle, has a couple matches with him, and then at Victory Road or Hard Justice, whichever one you pick, Eddie Guerrero is scheduled to face AJ Styles, but AJ no shows after being caught in a car crash, and then last replacing him will be Samoa Joe, where Eddie Guerrero will lie, cheat, and steal his way to a victory over Samoa Joe. And that's when people start realizing that Eddie Guerrero is officially a heel, and people are hating him, people are booing him, just the way he's doing it. When around this time, this is when like smarky crowds were a thing, where like people would boo just because they wanted a certain guy at the top. And yeah, basically Eddie and Joe will continue their feud. They'll start up a mini feud, and where Joe is getting over as a babyface and Eddie is the heel. And then it's revealed that Eddie Guerrero was the guy who ran over AJ Styles, and AJ Styles returns with a beatdown, just wanted to beat the crap out of Eddie. So at Bound for Glory 2008, the main event, Eddie Guerrero, AJ Styles. Uh, no rules, like anything goes, false count anywhere, whatever you want to do. Just make it a fucking brutal beatdown where AJ Styles regains the TNA championship. And that should be very good. Also, around this time, the main event Mafia breaks up, where Sting finally becomes the Joker Sting, and he'll beat Kurt Angle in the semi-main event. But this will eventually lead to Eddie and Sting to feud for the remainder of the year, with Sting coming up on top. And then, following that, and around 2008, they did a 8-card stud tournament where the winner will face the TNA champion. In this case, it'll be AJ Styles. And around the cool thing about tournaments is that it helps set up feuds. So in the 8-card stud tournament, Eddie Guerrero starts a mini feud with Mr. Anderson, where he wants to prove himself. Mr. Anderson could have been a world champion, but people like Eddie always got in the way of him. So that will start up a feud where at TNA Lockdown 2010, the culmination will be Mr. Anderson versus Eddie Guerrero in a steel cage match. And the winner, Mr. Anderson, in the main event, heel Jeff Hardy versus AJ Styles for the TNA Championship in a steel cage match as well. Jeff Hardy is your new TNA champion. And you could make Jeff Hardy a heel. I think he could work great as a heel. Like, I thought he was a solid heel. Like, and him not doing the Swanton bomb and like not getting people high pops, like that was a good run. Like, I actually like Jeff Hardy as a heel. I think that could work. So Jeff Hardy, we will keep him as a heel, and then Mr. Anderson just finished a great feud with Eddie Guerrero. And then Eddie Guerrero will take some time off because he needs to heal some injuries. He's much older now. So Eddie Guerrero will take the rest of the spring off. And then at Slammiversary 2010, I thought of when I was going to bring Eddie Guerrero back. And I decided to bring him back at Slammiversary, because I think that would be a great time. And I looked at the Slammiversary 2010 card, and yeah, it's a pretty meh show. Like, just by reading it, like, I actually seen only like parts of it, but in the show, I found out that Matt Morgan defeated Hernandez via disqualification. Instead, I would have Matt Morgan beat up Hernandez backstage. Matt Morgan comes, talks about um, how Hernandez has until the count of 10 to come out, or else he's the winner. And then they count to 10. Matt Morgan beats Hernandez via count out because he never showed up. And then it is announced that Matt Morgan will have another match, and that person will be the returning Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero returns as a face, beats Matt Morgan. And around this time, Jeff Hardy is still tearing the house down. I think Jeff Hardy should have stayed as a TNA champion and as a heel TNA champion. This would be fun, because I don't know what the hell TNA was thinking of not making Jeff Hardy. Like, I hate when they bring people when they're red hot, but they do jack shit with them. It's almost like Bret Hart in WCW. Essentially the same thing. Not as brutal, but that was pretty bad. But Eddie and Jeff uh, start feuding for the TNA World Championship, and they'll actually be going back and forth with the belt. I think that I love when people do that, when they go back and forth with the title. I think it could work great with Eddie. Plus, we get more world titles on Eddie, so he'll by the end of this he'll be like a 3-time TNA champion. But Eddie gets his big victory, then Jeff Hardy takes the belt back. Eddie tries to win it again, and then unfortunately it didn't work out. And then, because of the Jeff Hardy stood tall, Eddie still wants to be the TNA champion. Around this time, Kurt Angle is getting over. yet again, and he wants to be the world champion. So Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero will do a best of 7 series, uh, leading up to Bound for Glory, where Kurt Angle will beat Eddie Guerrero. Um, and Kurt Angle will go on to face Jeff Hardy down the road after Jeff Hardy finishes his feud with Sting, because that's the main event for Bound for Glory 2010 for me. Jeff Hardy versus Sting. Um, and, like I said, Jeff Hardy's still a heel. I think it could work to the best. And around this time, Eddie Guerrero is pretty directionless. So I bring in Rob Van Dam. And Rob Van Dam will feud with Eddie Guerrero for the remainder of the year. And finally, Eddie Guerrero gets a big victory over RVD. I think RVD could move on to the X Division Championship or something like that. I don't know. But he takes some time off, and then he comes back sometime in March or something, 2011. And he talks about how he is ready to leave pretty soon. He enjoyed his time in TNA, but it's time to hang it up. But before I hang things up, I want to have the best matches possible. So he goes on to feud against guys that he hasn't had a chance to fight yet, like just like a farewell tour, basically. He'll fight guys like Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian. Who else was around this time? There was a lot of great talent back in the day. They just didn't know how to use them. I'm sorry, TNA really fucking sucked. But yeah, that's what happens. Eddie Guerrero goes on a tear against like the guys that he hasn't fought yet, and then Kurt Angle around this time is the TNA World Champion yet again by beating Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy takes some time off to deal with his substance abuse and all that shit. And Eddie Guerrero, as he's going on the tour, he is loving, his time in TNA. He kind of remembers why he signed it with TNA in the first place. So at Slammiversary 2011, he makes a deal with Kurt Angle. If he wins the title, he'll re-sign with TNA. Promises. And if he doesn't, well, he'll just end it there. So the main event of Slammiversary 2011, Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, TNA Championship, title versus career. And these guys tear the house down. This could be like a 5-star classic, one of the greatest matches of all time. And Kurt Angle beats Eddie Guerrero. And that is Eddie Guerrero's final match in TNA. Now on to part 3, his final run. How does he come back to the WWE? We'll find out in part 3. Stay tuned next Monday. Until then, I'm out.